Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Wednesday. Beautiful day. We've had some sweet weather the last couple of days, or last few days, so really nice change of pace. Been getting a lot of rain and crap, so really cool. So I've been knee deep in covering all things Western. I'm a huge fan of the genre, so I've been covering a big movie collection that I got about. I think I got it about a month ago. It's a collection of like 20 westerns, a bunch of movies that I had never seen before, and I just finished the last the last movie on the first disc, and that is this guy right here. I got this DVD. It's four DVDs. I just started the second DVD last night. Watched a really awesome movie. So, and it's been great. I'm a huge fan of the genre. I particularly really love, the old school westerns, of course. I love classic John Ford, one of my favorite directors. Huge Clint Eastwood fan, huge Sergio Leone fan. And I really love, the Italian spaghetti western world. And, that's a genre. I love the kind of the exploitive westerns that came out of Europe in the 60s and 70s. Like, it's, again, it's like the same thing of why I love exploitation movies. It's it's uh, it's unique and different because last night I watched a film that I'm going to be covering pretty soon. That is a an Italian movie, and it's way more of like an Italian exploitation movie. And the last couple of movies I've covered have been more the American westerns. And at that time, even though they are quite a bit older, they are, I would say that those films were considered kind of big Hollywood productions. Well, I did a film, Winds of the Wasteland, with John Wayne. Of course, mega superstar, iconic, iconic actor of his time, whose, influence still is, I think, seen today as far as the action genre. And I love that stuff too. It's great, but there's something about, like, it's interesting. I've been watching, the last two movies, and today's movie is on a another American western that I'd never seen before. That was very cool. And and then last night I watched another film that, again, like I said, I'm going to be covering really soon, that I had never seen before, and it's definitely an Italian movie, and it's interesting because I was thinking of, like, wow, what, like automatically you feel like you're seeing something, like automatically you can tell it's an Italian film. And I was thinking, like, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference between, say, an American kind of big Hollywood western compared to um, an Italian knockoff, if you will, or exploitation version of a particular film or a series of films. And it's a real interesting difference. And I've kind of been thinking about that a lot, racking my brain. Like, what is the difference? And to me, it's I don't know. I think it's really, at the end of the day, it's like it's the same formula for any genre. You know how something is, whether something is a big Hollywood kind of representation or it's a super low budget indie representation of that particular subject or film. And one of the big examples of how, for me, a clear distinctive difference between American, like a big Hollywood film, and a exploitation version of that film, or something that represents that genre, is, even though it's not a western, but to me, I think it's the same exact thing. You take a movie like an iconic horror movie, which is definitely one of the greatest horror movies ever made, Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, which is just a classic, an amazing film. But that was a very big Hollywood budget horror film, essentially directed by the iconic household name Steven Spielberg, master director. And then you have, and that movie was hugely successful. And then you have, say, The Car, 1977, basically a total exploitative version of that with, and when I was thinking of the Western thing and watching the difference, like I was talking about The Winds of the Wasteland, and then watching this exploitation movie last night, Western also. Immediately, I was like, "Wow, okay." There's a distinct difference to me. There's, the acting isn't quite as good in the exploitation world, I guess you could say. You can tell the budget is not as high. Like it's fundamentally a lower budget, and they tend to be a little bit more violent. They tend to be exploitation movies tend to be a little more violent. They have a little bit more of a kind of a sleazier factor to them. The music also has like a real distinct flavor to it that removes itself from like your traditional kind of American score for a bigger Hollywood film, and it's just got that indie feel to it. The editing might not be as great, the acting, but it has this grittiness to it because it's so much more low budget. And it was like within minutes of watching this movie last night, I was like, "Yep, okay, that's the fundamental difference." And I always think that's interesting. But anyway, last night I watched at the time, it was a very big budget Hollywood film, and that is Song of Arizona, and it stars kind of an American icon in the world of Hollywood, but then also, I would say it's safe to say in the world of action. The archetype of the protagonist who's like the hero, the kind of the hero figure, and that is Roy Rogers. Anybody who has seen Die Hard, the very first Die Hard with Bruce Willis, there's lots of references to Roy Rogers in that with Bruce Willis's character in that film. And that's Roy Rogers. I would say, Song of Arizona. I watched it last night, and it's great. It's got I don't know. There are some. It's almost like a musical. I'm not a huge fan of musicals. I will say that. But there's quite a few scenes in it where there's like singing and dancing. It's interesting. It was directed by Frank McDonald. I had never seen this movie. It came out in 1946. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, one of the earliest westerns. And Roy Rogers, of course, at that time, and I think his influence as being kind of like an action star was, his influence is still seen now. Like case in point, like talking about Die Hard. It's interesting too because Roy Rogers plays essentially his self in this western. It's good. I mean, it's got some great action. Um, it's a little bit on the lighter side of things, but it's very entertaining. There's some great action, great gunplay. Um, yeah, it was very cool. I had never seen it. I've always, of course, growing up as a kid, was always familiar with Roy Rogers as being kind of one of the, I remember growing up as a kid, being introduced, knowing who like the Lone Ranger was, and Roy Rogers as kind of being probably my introduction to, kind of that hero character that came out of the Western um, genre. But it was great. It definitely kind of a little bit dated, 1946, but still really great. Still worth the watch. I had never seen it before, and I enjoyed it. You know, considering this came out in 1946. It also stars George F. Hayes, Dale Evans, who I believe she was also a pretty famous actress of her time. Johnny Catkins and Tommy Cook. And again, it was directed by Frank McDonald, but very cool movie. So again, this is like part. This was the last movie I watched that was on the first disc of this collection. And again, this is kind of like a thing that I do when I get into a certain genre. I sometimes really want to take that deep exploration to kind of trace the lineage, the legacy of, what movies, like, for instance, a movie like High Plains Drifter, which is one of my all-time favorite westerns. And that's a real, I kind of consider that movie to be kind of a grindhouse movie in a lot of ways. It's super low budget, but it's real gritty, it's really dark. Stars Clint Eastwood, I believe it was directed by Clint Eastwood, but I want to when I get into a film like that, I want to kind of trace it back to like what other things, what's that a culmination of? So here I am talking about a film from 1946 starring Roy Rogers, and it's tracing that whole lineage, and also all of the Italian films that came out in the 60s and 70s. It's that same kind of interesting thing of things that are you know things when a genre emerges. There's tropes, there's films that are very very successful, and then you have films that and directors that where people don't have quite the amount of money that they need, but they still make something to try to like capitalize on it, and that is the art or the business of exploitation. So very very cool. Definitely recommend it. And again, all of these movies that I've watched so far are all movies I've never seen before. So very very cool. The quality again is not very good, but totally worth having. And some of these movies I would love to buy on Blu-ray at some point. So thanks again, and stay tuned for some more westerns coming your way. Peace.